The introduction of part two begins with the students of Hailsham leaving and going to these cottages. At these cottages, they're very run down. So here I mention our setting change. Um, they're not the nicest. It's an abandoned farm, and sometimes they have to wear 3 layers just to stay warm. And at these cottages, they have what are called veterans. These are other students who have left either Hailsham or other schools, and they have been living here for a while now. So I kind of wanted to discuss where we see the emergence of science fiction come out in chapter 10. So looking back at chapter 6, when Kathy is listening to the Never Let Me Go Judy Bridgewater track, and she's pretending that she's holding a baby. Um, what does this mean for these students? So we already know that something is amiss, and Miss Lucy kind of mentions um, to be told and not to be told. Why are they designed to be donating their organs? What is the reason for living at this point? Um, Tommy and Kathy desperately search for the reason for this unusual you in what Miss Lucy shared with him. They're going to start piecing the fact that they are different together. Now, another place that definitely shows the emergence of science fiction, or at least the idea of it, appears on page 119, and I'll just go ahead and read this excerpt for you. So, why had we stayed silent that day? I suppose it was because even at that age, we were 9 or 10, we knew just enough to make us weary of that whole territory. It's hard to know, to remember just how much we knew by then. We certainly knew, though not in any deep sense, that we were different from our guardians and also from the normal people outside. We perhaps even knew that a long way down the line there were donations waiting for us, but we didn't really know what that meant. The language of Miss Lucy and the children in their understanding was bringing the reader to a better understanding of what this purpose of donations were. I think this is really driven home at the last page of chapter 10. And I'll go ahead and read this to you as well. This was in those days following our conversation by the pond when he'd first confided in me about Miss Lucy. The days during which, as I see it, we started off our whole thing of wondering and asking questions about ourselves that we kept going between us through the years. When I told Tommy what had happened with Madam in the dorm, he came up with a fairly simple explanation. But then, of course, we all knew something I hadn't known back then, which was that none of us could have babies. So, coming to this universal understanding that none of these particular characters could produce children is a very obvious hint that something about them is not natural. Um, and I think this is certainly an interesting and really compelling chapter. And at the time, I didn't really understand the impact that the conversation with Miss Lucy would have on the rest of the story. But Miss Lucy seems like a very genuine character, and Tommy a very innocent one. Um, Now, going back to that Judy Bridgewater tape, I wouldn't have called this subtle, but Madam approaching Kathy as she imagines herself rocking her baby really brings out a surge of emotions. What does this mean for these students? Now, as they are leaving Hailsham, they have to write an essay. So I kind of mentioned here, students leave, they're writing this essay. Now, why does this matter? What is the point of this? Um, we don't really know. Your senior year of high school, you will do a similar thing. On your way out, you will do a larger paper. But what does this mean for the students of Hailsham? So I kind of want to jump forward a little bit. We see literature within the novel, especially in chapter 10. Ishiguro makes a lot of references to different writers and different pieces of literature, and this happens in a lot of things that we do read. But literature is so important because it brings together politics, societal conflict, romance, all within the scope of fiction or nonfiction. In chapter 10, Kathy makes a very remarkable point about literature. You could go around implying you read all kinds of things, nodding knowingly when someone mentioned, say, War and Peace, in the understanding that no one would scrutinize your claim too rationally. For these students, is there a real purpose in indulging into the worldly conflicts or reflecting on these great writers? This might be Ishiguro's point. Reading, or let's say the presence of literature, provides these students with a sense of humanity, whether they are aware of this or not. Um, we'll kind of mention this here. Kathy knew the potential she had, especially with the literature she has read, or the heroines or the heroes she has read in the stories. Um, Perhaps Kathy believes she has fulfilled her role as the fictional heroine. Um, she declares on the first page she is in fact boasting because her donors always tended to do much better than expected. Now, is this a reassuring tactic? Does Kathy believe she has met her potentials like characters she's read in um, Daniel Deronda or a Hardy novel? We don't know. But just the last point I want to make, we kind of see the relationship between Ruth and Tommy begin to make Kathy feel jealous. So we mentioned that Kathy and Ruth were foil characters early on, but this really kind of brings out that fire in Kathy. Is she jealous? Does she like Tommy? In It kind of seems like it, but Kathy is too much of a good person. She's too good of a person to ever interfere with that. So again, that's kind of why I pulled this photo here. We see the kind of complex between the friends and how that's going to play out.